changing to one of seriousness. He explained that he had come to meet me not to discuss my niece, but to request ownership of her house. I stared at him wide-eyed as he told how his family had suddenly lost their home and that our parents had already loaned him a large sum of money over the years, so he could no longer ask for assistance. Since he knew I had purchased the house with Syl's money, he believed it was only fair for me and my niece to let him keep the house to accommodate his large family while we relocated to a smaller space. I questioned him why he thought he could even pose such a question. My brother went on to defend it by claiming that he had previously done a lot for Syl, but she had turned out to be nothing more than a leech. I knew this wasn't true because Syl had always worked and paid her portion of the bills, including throughout her chemotherapy treatments. She covered her own medical expenses and had health insurance. I brought this out to my brother, telling him that it was ridiculous for him to expect a house when he hadn't even bothered raising my niece after Syl died. This simply made him angrier. He told me that, as his sister, I should stop holding a candle for a deceased woman and instead assist him and his family in securing the house before my niece turned 18. He persuaded me to view things his way, saying that the house was his legitimate possession. The weight of his words hung in the air as I considered his request. I couldn't help but consider the ramifications of such a decision. The property was more than simply a physical asset. It symbolized security and stability, which had been meticulously planned for my niece's future. To give it up, no matter how badly my brother needed it, would mean breaking commitments and risking the stability I had fought so hard to establish. My niece's well-being and future were paramount, and any decision involving her assets had to be made with her best interests in mind, no matter how difficult or emotional the situation. In that moment, I grasped the gravity of the situation and the need to stick to my beliefs. I informed him unequivocally that I could not support his request and that he should take responsibility for his own family rather than relying on his deceased wife's possessions. I continued to tell him how ashamed I was that he even considered this option, and how he had given up all rights when he handed over custody of his daughter to me following Syl's death. My brother's face flushed red with rage at my statement, but I continued before he could interject again. I voiced my disappointment that he had not been present for my niece during all of these years. I didn't hesitate to remind him that, while I realized Syl had betrayed him, he should also see that she had been the victim of countless traumas. It was unjust of him to put the blame onto her now, especially because he had not supported her after her first sexual assault. When I revealed the assault, his eyes widened in amazement, and he demanded to know how I knew about it, as no one else knew the truth. This is when I told him that Syl had confided in me and entrusted me with the task of caring for my niece before she died. When my brother heard this, he became accusatory, alleging I had surprised him and labeling me a liar, just like Syl. I shook my head, reminding him that Syl was terminally ill and had already endured enough. After all the years of him not taking responsibility for my niece while I had done everything I could to assist her, he had no right to bring up the past and complain now simply because he wanted Syl's money. I was weary of him constantly behaving like a victim. It was disheartening to see him shift blame and claim entitlement when he had not been financially supportive of my niece for years. His boldness in coming 16 years later and requesting ownership of her house felt like a slap in the face, ignoring all of my sacrifices and attempts to assure my niece's well-being and future security. My brother was unhappy because I refused to give in to his demands. Since our meeting, he and my parents have called me often, accusing me of being difficult for no reason and insisting that I have family devotion to them rather than my niece. It's demoralizing and terrifying to discover that when it comes to money, even your own blood relatives can devolve into something unknown. I continue to stand up for my niece and refuse to give in to my brother's unreasonable demands. Update 1. First and foremost, I am astounded by how kind everyone has been in my DMs and comments. Thank you for making me grin. Second, I can't tell you how many women have contacted me, giving their own stories and saying how closely they connect to what Syl went through. I wish I could give every one of you a great, tight embrace and relieve your anguish. Sexual assault is one of the most horrible things that can happen to a woman, and I wish someone could have helped Syl at the time. She wasn't a bad person, and she didn't deserve what she went through. It's unfortunate that I have to defend her, but just because you haven't suffered sexual assault doesn't imply others don't. Syl had demonstrated amazing courage following the first assault, but the second occurrence left her shaken, rightly so. She was immobilized in fear, as many sexual assault victims are. I wish she had felt comfortable enough to open up to me sooner, because I would have been there for her in every way. Knowing what she went through crushes my heart, and I wish I could have been there for her during those difficult days. To those who label Syl a cheater and question her narrative, I really pray you never go through such anguish only to have your truth challenged. If Syl had really had an affair, she may have instructed me to contact the man for custody after she died. Furthermore, if there had been an affair, the man would not have remained silent all these years. he would have most certainly come up, especially given how much money Sil left behind for her kid. If she had an affair, I'm sure she would have wanted her daughter to know her biological father. Sil did everything possible to safeguard her daughter. Update 2. I sat down with my niece and told her that my brother had lately been to speak with me, and his main goal was to gain control of the house. I advised her to be cautious if he ever approached her. As I talked, I could see the rage and pain in her eyes. She had hoped for years that her father would reach out to her because he actually cared. However, when she discovered that his contact was motivated by his own wants, she felt deceived. "I can't believe him," she informed me, her voice shaking from emotion. "After all this time, he only reached out when he needed something." She informed me that she did not want anything to do with him and expressed her gratitude that her mother had not left him anything. She then hugged me and expressed her gratitude for everything I'd done for her over the years. Her statements were simultaneously painful and empowering to hear. It brought tears to my eyes as I understood that despite the sorrow of her father's acts, she was strong and determined to carry on without him. Update 3. After speaking with my niece, I decided to send a lengthy email to my parents and brother to document everything and state my position clearly. In the email, I described our previous interactions and highlighted that they had no right to ask me to hand over my niece's home to my brother. I stressed that this request constituted financial fraud and stated unequivocally that I would take legal action if my brother attempted to see me or my niece again to request the house for his family. I informed my brother that by choosing not to care for his kid, he surrendered all rights. I also discussed the numerous difficulties and frustrations I had encountered while raising my niece on my own, with no prior experience. I highlighted the emotional, financial, and logistical hurdles I had faced in providing her with a secure and caring home. I also informed him that he had never paid child support or checked in on his daughter in all these years. I pointed out that he and my parents should feel nothing but guilt for attempting to take something that did not belong to them. I insisted that they had no right to suddenly intervene and make demands after all this time, especially because they had contributed nothing to her upbringing or well-being. The email was detailed and sincere, reflecting the sacrifices I had made for my niece. I reaffirmed my resolve to protect her and honor Sil's wishes no matter what. My message was clear and unequivocal. They had forfeited their right to be a part of her life due to their negligence and lack of support, and they had no place in her future. I never received a response after submitting the email. However, my brother and parents have not contacted me again, which is satisfactory for me. The silence speaks volumes, and I'm happy to have some peace knowing they won't meddle with my niece's life anymore. My niece is now preparing for her prom and impending birthday celebration. Watching her manage these thrilling occasions makes me very proud. I am so proud of the woman she has become, and I can't wait to support her at every big milestone in her future. It makes me emotional just thinking about how much she has grown and how much she resembles Sil, especially in her lips and brows. Every day I see Sil's strength and tenacity in my niece, and I only hope that she will be as strong as her mother, no matter what she does. I overheard my fiancée say my money was the best part of me, so I humiliated her. She trashed my house, and now I'm taking her to court. I am now 29 years old, with an MBA and a very lucrative position in my father's firm. I know this makes me sound like a snobbish affluent kid, but please hear me out. Growing up we weren't doing well. We battled a lot, and our family was deeply in debt. I was young at the time, so I don't remember every detail, but my father made a highly hazardous loan with our house as security, which was the only valuable asset we had because it was his grandfather's. That money was what let him launch his business, and despite a tough start, things improved. It wasn't enjoyable at the time, but looking back, I'm thankful that I wasn't born with a silver spoon in my mouth. I believe it made me more down to earth and helped me understand the importance of hard effort. This experience prompted me to get an MBA because I wanted to contribute to what my father had established. While it may appear that I'm merely the son working in his father's company, benefiting from nepotism, I confess there is some truth to this, but I also know I'm there on merit. I worked hard and put forth my own effort to help the company flourish. As a result, my family and I are both financially secure. Because of this, I've become quite cautious in relationships, knowing that we didn't always have this money and don't want to wind up with someone who is only interested in my bank account. In my mid-20s, when things were going well, I dated a lot. Many of my dates did not even make it past the first date. I probably only went on a third date a few times. Then, 2.5 years ago, I met someone named Brianna, not her real name for obvious reasons. She was beautiful. When I saw her smile, I wanted to go say hello. I discovered she was a nurse, which made her even more appealing to me because it is a career I much admire. I asked for her phone number, and that was the beginning of our relationship. I've always been careful in relationships, and I approach them with the goal of determining whether the individual could be my future wife before taking things too seriously. I aim to make sure that money is only a minor part of the reason someone is with me. I don't want somebody to be with me based only on the fact that I'm attractive. Brianna did not exhibit any gold-digging activity that I noticed. She was intelligent, witty, and brought everything I desired to the table. So 2 years after we met, I proposed to her, and she accepted. Brianna is currently my fiancée, and she promised to spend the rest of her life with me, which made me very pleased. I'm about to get to the point of this narrative, but first, there was one important event that soured me. It is worth highlighting. Obviously, as we got closer, Brianna learned more about my family's financial situation. She knew my family was not impoverished and that we were doing well. A few months after the proposal, I mentioned the possibility of a prenuptial agreement. To be honest, I felt it was a perfectly acceptable conversation, but she disagreed. She flipped out. According to her, suggesting a prenuptial agreement was bad for 2 reasons. First, it appeared to her that I did not think our relationship would last. That is not true, but even if I'm completely dedicated to the marriage, if she wakes up one day and says she is done, I have no influence over that. Second, she interpreted it as a sign that I did not trust her not to rob me if things didn't go as planned. That's the gist of it, but we ended up arguing for an hour and going to bed upset with each other. After pondering all night, I informed her that the prenuptial agreement would be unnecessary. Yes, I know it was silly, but I loved her so much that I decided to let it go because I didn't want the prenup to be the reason we broke up. Following all of that, things improved between us very quickly. Now, I truly need third parties to tell me what to do. One of my fiancé's colleagues was holding a barbecue, and she encouraged me to join them. I decided it would be a wonderful opportunity for me to meet some of the people she worked with, as she referenced them constantly. When I arrived, everyone was friendly, and I had a terrific time. To be honest, I met several of the nurses that worked with her on most shifts. At one point, I was outdoors talking with a fellow about sports and investments. I knew she was inside conversing with her pals, and that was okay. When I realized I wanted to use the restroom, I returned to the house via the back door. I'm not sure how to describe it, but the back entrance led to a hallway that terminated in the living room. Standing at the rear door, you couldn't see anyone seated in the living room until you turned the corner. As I was headed to the bathroom, I heard my fiancé's voice among others, and it was evident from the first sentence that I was the subject of talk. It began with them discussing how well I dress, which naturally led to how pricey my clothing is. Then my money showed up. The girls were chirping and smiling as they discussed how fortunate she was to have found someone with money. Then I heard my fiancé say something that hit me hard. He has a lot of money, and honestly, his money is the best part of him by far. This was followed by more giggling and laughter. She even said, he asked for a prenup. I said no, of course, I need to be able to pay out if things go south. More laughter followed. At that point, I walked back out of the house. I honestly did not need to use the restroom anymore. When we returned home, she recognized something was wrong with me, but I didn't tell her until she went to bed. This happened a few days ago and I'm not sure what to do. She's a wonderful person, and I adore her, but I'm having a struggle with myself about whether I should dismiss it as dumb girl talk that went too far, or if it's worth canceling everything we've planned for the wedding and kicking her out of the house. I honestly don't know what to do. My mind is telling me to stop things since this is exactly what I didn't want. Someone who values my money too highly. She was the perfect lady for me just a few days ago, and I hate how quickly things changed. My heart is asking me to talk about it, but I can't figure out why. I would appreciate any and all advice. Edit 1. Many people believe that I should not have compromised on the prenuptial agreement and should have stopped things right there. Many of you expressed it in overly harsh ways, but I have strong skin. If I had the chance again, I might not have done things differently, but I agree that I would give someone else the same counsel that many of you are giving me here. I should have remained firm on the prenup since, even if I decide to stay with her, the comment I overheard emphasizes how essential a prenup is to her. Edit 2. I'm inclined to agree with people who think I should terminate things now rather than take a chance with someone who has demonstrated that my money is his major concern. The only issue is, I believe the best case scenario is that we revisit the prenuptial agreement. I know it would protect me, but it wouldn't necessarily change her attitude toward my money. But isn't it natural for someone to appreciate that their partner has a nice income? Edit 3. Okay, I've had a lot of sense instilled in me. I will still bring up the prenup to see what she says, but I am ready to terminate things. I adore Brianna, therefore it's difficult for me to let her go. I want to know if I gave things a chance. Update. Here's the update that I know many of you have been waiting for. The story about my fiancée, who I overheard telling her friends that my money was the best part of me, has concluded, and I am overjoyed with how things turned out. The first thing I needed to do was speak with Brianna again about the prenup. I believe it was about a week after we returned from the cookout that I told her to sit down for a discussion. When I informed her we wanted to talk about the prenup again, she blew up, like she had the last time. It got even worse the second time around. She complained about how it showed I didn't trust her and wasn't rooting for the relationship to succeed. I attempted to explain that it was about defending my father's hard work. I own a substantial portion of his company, rather than protecting myself. But she wouldn't have it. She kept yelling, and I tried everything I could to persuade her of my point, but nothing worked. I asked her if she would marry me if the prenup was a requirement. She didn't ponder long before announcing that she would seriously examine our future together. At that time, I realized I couldn't win her over. I informed her that after the first time, I was willing to drop the prenup, so I asked her to guess why I was bringing it up again. She was obviously bewildered, so I promised her I'd help her figure it out. I asked her to recall a conversation she had with her nursing colleagues at a friend's cookout. It was all she said. "We talked about so many things, I don't know what you're talking about." I responded, "You don't recall smiling and joking with your pals, claiming that my money was the nicest part of me? You don't remember telling them you couldn't sign a prenup because you wouldn't get the cash if we divorced?" At that point, it was evident she remembered what I was saying because she began to quiver and appear incredibly anxious. I waited for her to affirm or reject what I had stated, but she did not respond. I pushed her to talk, but she only stared at me, her hands trembling. I'm not sure why, but that made me giggle, and it appeared to set her off. She started crying and wailing without responding to anything I had said. At that moment, I was frustrated that she had nothing to say, and I expected a response from her. So I told her that the wedding was no longer going to happen. She slumped on the ground, muttering please, through tears and sniffles. I stood up, went into our room, locked the door, and went to bed. The following morning, she was waiting for me. She didn't appear like she had slept all night. When she saw me, she approached me and was extremely friendly, but I shook her off. She attempted to explain the context of what I had overheard, stating she was simply trying to fit into the Gossip Girl ambiance and did not mean what she had said. She accused her friends and colleagues of being terrible influences. She argued that my money was not the reason she fell in love with me. I thought it might be true at first, but I had the impression that she had grown to adore the money. She claimed she would sign the prenup and that it would not be an issue for her. Even with that, I didn't know what to say to her. I took her hand, looked her in the eye compassionately, and carefully removed the engagement ring from her finger. I had paid a lot of money for that ring and I didn't want it to end up in her hands. That hit a nerve. She began crying, but quickly switched to cussing me out. She branded me ugly, unattractive, with a little penis, and even queer. She stated she slept with a man she met at a bar simply because she felt like it. I'm not sure if I believe that part, but it really doesn't matter anymore. She stated my money was the one thing she liked about me and she wished she could have milked me for more. She threw every insult she could think of at me, and I eventually started giggling. That's when she started throwing stuff at me. As much as I wanted to remain calm and unconcerned, she began flinging some potentially deadly stuff, so I ran to the bedroom and shut myself in. It took almost 2 hours until things calmed down. When I came out, she had left, but she had wrecked the entire apartment. I was enraged, and in that moment, I knew I had made the proper decision. I photographed everything and obtained footage from one of the indoor cameras I put. After that, I left the house and went to sleep in a hotel because it was complete pandemonium, and I had no idea where to begin with the cleanup. This is where I chose to have fun. I visited her Facebook and Instagram profiles, where she had announced our engagement. I composed a message. "I'm sorry